Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today will be part 5 of our discussion of the 7 blunders of Freemasonry, charity without connection.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we'll be discussing charity without connection, the 7 blunders of Freemasonry that we can overcome, hopefully soon. I'm Matt Appel. I'm a very worshipful brother, Matt Appel. I'm a Mason down here in the Grand Lodge of Washington, along with very worshipful brother David Colbeth. And also here with us are 2 of our other usual hosts, worshipful brother Stephen Chung and right worshipful brother Trevor McEwen, who's the Grand Historian of the Grand Lodge of British Columbia in the Yukon. And we may as well just make him a host. He's here so often, special guest, most worshipful brother Jim Mendoza, past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Washington, for which we thank you for coming out here, most worshipful sir.
My pleasure.
So it's been a few weeks since we went over the conversation of sort of all of the blunders the presentation you gave. Is there an overview of charity without connection that you'd like to swing past us?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I always want to make a point of when I talk about charity without connection is simply this. If you're going to ask the brethren to give, or if you're going to ask anyone to give, they've got to know that it means something. That you're just not saying, well, yeah, we're Masons, or I'm Grand Master, I should have a charity, and this is what it's going to be. Because all too often when you do something like that, guess what? People feel put upon. And when they feel put upon, there's a sense of resentment there. And then of course that old thing that happens, expectation exceeds reality in terms of what you're able to achieve. And you don't get that feeling. When people give and they give from the heart, or they give because the fact that, yes, this person who's asking me to make that give, I know is going to make sure that the money goes to where it's supposed to go. That engenders a sense of positive feeling, not only toward the individuals making the ask, or the organization that's making the ask, but also to the end cause that's being supported. I talked in the presentation about the landslides in Oso, which is a community in Snohomish County down here in Washington. I mean, this was devastating. You don't have to Google too far, when you type in OSO landslides and the stories that come out. And Arlington Lodge, which is below Oso, really stepped up with respect to supporting that community. And because of the fact that the community was right there, and people could see it and see the devastation, they probably had likely they had friends who were part of that devastation. Guess what? They were there was that connection there. There was a very natural connection to being able to out there to support that group, and so as a result, and it expanded beyond just the lodge. Washington Masonic Charities got involved. It was just a wonderful thing to watch happen. Now, not the landslides per se, no, but the support of that community that took place, and so that was. It was a joy. It was a joyous thing to watch. Let's take it a step further. In my job as an education outreach specialist with the state of Washington, I give retirement seminars, and I gave a retirement seminar out in Skagit County, a little north of Snohomish County. But I made it a point to say, look, and I want to have a food drive, and I want this food to be collected to go to the Oso Food Bank. And those people who attended my seminar, because they knew me, And they knew that when I would say something that it was coming from the heart, guess what? They brought in food like it was nobody's business. We had something in the neighborhood, like what, 250, 300 people attend that retirement seminar, and everyone brought at least a bag of food. And who was there to collect it? The Masons of Arlington Lodge. So you start with a sincere connection, and it just grows from there, because people see that, okay, so from my standpoint, I saw that the lodge was sincere. I was able to pass that on to the people who had no connection in many cases to OSO, but they saw my sincerity and they turned around and supported that. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, it's more than just checkbook charity, right?
To provide a counterpoint to that, in my lodge, we had a guy who he's actually since moved to another lodge, but he it seemed like every other meeting, it was probably less often than that. This was back when we met twice a week, or twice a month rather. But it seemed like at least once a month he would bring up some charity, all of which were perfectly legitimate, were great things. A camp to support kids with a certain kind of disability, or all things that you would say, yeah, that's something I support. That's it's not like, no, I hate those disabled kids. They were all worthy causes, but the lodge got sort of overwhelmed with, hey guys, why don't we give money to this? And we ended up being sort of, I don't know what the word is, grumpy about it, as you were saying earlier, where it sort of broke our desire to be involved in that sort of thing. And what we actually ended up doing, by way of overcoming the 7 blunders, what our lodge ended up doing was forming a charity committee and giving them a budget and saying, hey, here's your X number of dollars. Anyone who wants charity for something that's not, explicitly the Grand Lodge or whatever, go see the charity committee, and they will report on how they spent the money at, every quarter or at the end of the term, or I forget what it was. And so that through that, we managed to sort of corral that random, again, perfectly legitimate charities that deserve money, but things that were taxing the brothers' desire to be involved.
No, it's perfect. You're perfectly right on that one. Many will recall when I was Grand Master, I had 2 charities. One of them was Puget Sound Komen, and it's no secret here in Washington, my support of the fight against breast cancer. I have a personal connection. My wife is a survivor, and there's a fine line that you walk when you support. When you want to put forward the idea of supporting this charity because of my own personal connection. I don't want to, I never want to be in a position where I'm just throwing my wife out there for sympathy. And I think I was successful in that by pointing out that, yes, my wife's an example, but there are so many, and we've had that history in our Grand Lodge, and the brethren supported it. It was just amazing, the outpouring of support for that. I think in part because of Laura, but also in part because of the fact that they saw a sense of sincerity. I also made it fun. I think I'm the first and so far only Grand Master to ever have competing team ties. As Stephen and Trevor, I'm not quite sure what it is in BC Yukon, but the Grand Master down in Washington every year has a tie as part of his team uniform. Sometimes it's the same tie a couple of years in a row. Like 3 years in a row, we had the Masonic tartan, and a lot of times it's just a Grand Master just coming up with something that he thinks looks really cool and will be a good advertisement for Freemasonry. I had 2 ties. One was purple, my allegiance to the University of Washington, and the other was crimson and gray to basically take care of the people who cheered the Cougars. And I sold out of all the ties, and every dollar went to Komen. Every dollar. It was just absolutely amazing. The other charity was Puget Sound Honor Flight, which was a charity that basically paid for veterans, primarily World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam War veterans, to be able to go to Washington, D.C. and contemplate their monuments. This was a very easy charity to promote. But beyond that, it was also, it was also very tactile because people would go to the airport and they would connect themselves to the charity. There's nothing like sitting in front of a World War II Korean or Vietnam veteran and talking to them about what this trip means to them, and just being in awe that they would think that, why do I deserve this trip? And there was a connection there that happened. We gave somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 to them, and that was because of the fact that the brethren the brethren made their own connection to that. And that's, and so when I talk about charity without connection, that's what I mean. I mean, it's like you as an individual will give more, whether it be money, whether it be time, whether it be talent, if you have a natural connection, or if you can build a natural connection, versus if I were to send you at a Grand Master's appeal saying, hey, here's my charity, please support. And here's a nice lapel pin if you do so. So that's kind of what that's all about. I mean, we've kind of evolved charity, because remember, back in the day, charity was, I will help my brother, I will help his widow, I will help his orphan. It's expanded beyond that demographic, if you will. It's expanded to, how can I impact the community, or how can I impact the communities I serve, or how can I impact a cause that's important to me. But again, without any connection, reality will fall far short of expectation.
Well, and as the country, at least the United States anyway, I imagine other parts of the world too, as they've been developing, Masonry has generally been there and was essentially the backbone of a community in many cases. So there, before governments or before charitable programs or before services to the community or services to the people, usually a Masonic lodge was there, and many times the Masons, because they were so prominent, and they were there to assist if somebody needed, as you mentioned, food or water or support, or building a building or whatever they needed, their support, their charity. And that was one of the functions of the Masonic Lodge, and it's continued. It's different now because there are so many services, but that's why it's so important, I think, as you say, to reconnect with the reason behind the giving, whatever it is. And I love the idea of, it's not just money, it's time and talent as well. And those can be, and in reality, even just the time and the connection, the hug, or the compassion. One of our regular co-hosts here, Zay McCune, Very Worship Brother Zay McCune, has a presentation. He talks about the origins of the word charity, and it has a Greek connection to the word agape, which is love, and a direct connection to our Masonic ritual, brotherly love. And so in reality, if you could take the word charity out of any of our ritual and replace it with the word love or brotherly love, it would bring a whole new meaning to our ritual and to who we are as Masons. And I really appreciate that.
No, absolutely. I mean, yesterday I went to a memorial service for an old friend, and his daughters in specific are very close to me. And, you talk about the importance of a hug. Okay. Even in a pandemic. And sure enough, as fate would have it, when I, because it was, the way we have to do things nowadays, there she was, she made eye contact with me and she collapsed into my arms. That is an act of, as to use the phrase agape, that is an act of charity. And she was able to, again, she came to me because, there is a connection there, we've known each other for, dare I say, more than 40 years. Okay. So guess what? There is a connection. And so all these things come together, and, there's a line in the Scottish Rite installation ritual on the installation of the almoner, and it talks about, and it goes to visit the homes of the sick, the widow, the orphan, to minister to them comfort and consolation belongs to the mission and duty of Freemasonry, and is that in which most man resembles God. That's a powerful line. As I think I said in the base presentation, charity cannot just be the unmeaning doling out of alms. You know, it has to mean something. It has to mean something to the individual. You know, it has to, and if you're going to broaden it out to the lodge, it has to mean something to the lodge. And if you're going to broaden it out to the Grand Lodge and the brethren that you're out there, it's got to mean something to them too. Because if it doesn't mean anything, then again, like I said, you stand the risk of having individuals feel put upon, and that defeats the purpose of it all.
So
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Steve. I was
going to say in our district, our district deputy grand master has his annual choice of charities. Each district deputy gets to choose a charity that they're going to support, and typically we would have 50-50 draws and or raffles and things like that to help raise money for that charity. And at every meeting he would go to, he would enlighten us as to the charity, why he chose the charity, and why it has special meaning to him, and so on. So it was enlightening, because we have lodges up and down our valley, and they all choose when they take their turn at being district deputy, you get enlightened as to the different charities in the valley that I had no idea even existed, right? Like normally it's quite common for a district deputy to choose the food bank or the women's shelter or something like that. This past fundraising effort, the district deputy found an organization that assists the elderly in having some sort of resemblance of Christmas. They have nobody else in their family. They're alone, and nobody does these special things for them anymore. And so this organization reaches out and has a program where they include them in things and do special things for them. And so it was kind of cool. I had no idea that charity even existed. So it's really cool when you hear the stories from the district deputy as to, why. It's unfortunate that with COVID, we didn't get these the opportunities for him to come to each lodge, and we had to read correspondence, but at least it was done. And now that Zoom is on, he's actually got follow-up questions and follow-up support from other people, because it's touched their hearts when they heard about it. So pretty cool.
Jim, we don't have a whole lot of time on this show to go into the details of it, but another story that came to mind, and I don't know if you can do it in a minute or two, probably won't do it justice, but your connection, your story about Gander, Newfoundland, and how that whole talk about a connection, the planes landing, people needing a place to stay, food needing to be delivered, and Masons and Masonic Lodge there being able to open their doors and to assist, and just talk about a super connection. We could probably do a whole show, or maybe even a small series on that program. But you
probably could and probably should be. I may even have a connection for you and if Stephen and Trevor don't, I think I have a connection to somebody from that area. But that story is amazing in the fact that the only connection that those folks had was that, okay, the initial connection was these planes are going to land, but their charity started from the fact that, okay, if I'm put in a similar position, what would I hope that somebody would do for me? And so that whole thing, that what they did was stunning. The stories that the stories that you hear, and not just from, not just from the musical Come From Away, but also if you read some of if you go to YouTube and type in Gander, Newfoundland, and see the Tom Brokaw report about what happened there. These were people who said, who basically said, if I were in a similar position, what would I hope someone would do for me? And they did some amazing things. But beyond that, once they crossed that bridge, they actually made individual connections. There is a story of a lady whose son was a firefighter in New York, and she was trying to get a hold of him and couldn't. As fate would have it, the connection she made was with a woman up there whose son was a firefighter. Now, obviously, the demands of the firefighter in Gander, Newfoundland are far different than the demands of a firefighter there, but there's still that kinship. And as dramatized in Come From Away, when the lady from New York found out that her son was one of the firefighters who was killed, the call she made was to the lady in Newfoundland. And they automatically knew what was wrong. They automatically, were able to share in that moment. Take it a step further, when Come From Away was being shown in New York, the folks from Gander came down to New York, right? And guess what? Those two ladies made it a point to see each other. And again, to share in that. But again, it's an amazing story. And I think, that's a whole different podcast. And I think you'd enjoy that. I think you'd enjoy that a lot.
So if we were to try to wrap up this idea of charity without connection, or trying to make sure we have connections with our charity, would an idea possibly be to maybe focus on a single charity or a single idea for a term or a year or 6 months or whatever, and maybe have the lodge vote? I know Matt kind of mentioned about having his situation where there's over and over and over again these, and again, no fault to this man that was trying to be beneficial to his community and to the programs, but maybe trying to say, hey, this is what we're going to do as a lodge, and just overwhelm them with, now we can't, with the COVID, you can't visit them physically, but cards and letters and phone calls and whatever you can imagine.
Some lodges do it like Matt's, have charity committees. Okay. Some lodges have actually set up what I will call a noble cause, where they've said, okay, what is our mission going to be and what are we going to support? For example, Eureka Lodge number 20 in Seattle, they support the science fair. It makes sense. The name of the lodge, right? They've always supported the science fair. Daylight 232, which is again which bills itself as the Lodge of the Arts, supports the Seattle Youth Symphony Orchestra. Again, that natural connection, because Daylight Lodge was when it was crafted way back when, was crafted as a lodge for performers, who typically work nights and so can't enjoy nighttime lodge experience, but we created daytime lodge experience. My lodge, Frank S. Land, has built into its budget donations to the youth groups, as well as when the ad request comes in, there's no debate. It's already in the budget. We're buying an ad from them. But I don't think there's anything wrong with individual masters coming to the table and saying, hey, this is important to me. But I would hope that again, to tie this all in a nice little bow, I would hope when that master does finally take his seat in the East, that he doesn't just surprise the brethren with a charity. That through the course of his time, they understand what this man is all about. And as a result, when he says, this is what I want to support, we'll support you. That's the lodge can get behind it without question, versus because they're obligated to do so.
And so on that note, hopefully we've given the folks out there some ideas on overcoming the blunder of the charity without connection. Want to say thank you, Most Worshipful Brother Jim, for coming out this evening on behalf of Stephen and Trevor and David and myself. And we look forward to talking to everybody here on our next episode, which will be episode 6 in the series of Overcoming the 7 Blunders. Good night.